Hello, welcome to part 6 of my Sequential Growth Series. My name is Allie with A. Marie Speaks, and this video is going to go over the 5th point of view. So if you're brand new and this is a video that you've just clicked on, welcome. You can certainly listen about this section of perspective. But it's very helpful, of course, to understand that these sequentially build. And so this 5th point of view that I'm going to talk about today is actually built upon 1 through 4 that we've already talked about. So if you'd like, you can certainly check those out before you watch this video. I'll link the original part 1 down below, and so you can start where it's intended to be started if you'd like to. For those of us who have been joining, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for taking an interest in something I think is really cool. And in fact, organic math, as what I've kind of deemed it, in that way that it is the math that we see organic nature working with, that we have actually been inspired to create because of the natural world. And in fact, it should reflect and should be as free and alive and as fluid and full of energy as life is. You know, a lot of people think of math, writing numbers, any of this kind of stuff as just, words on paper, as just black and white, as this kind of separate, not alive, kind of inanimate type of expressions. And while I do think there are varieties and avenues of mathematics, science that do reflect dead information and that are in fact used as control mechanisms to control the present moment with dead information, I'll get into that. And I've talked a little bit about that here and there, sort of in my intro, and I think I'll do a bit of an organic math intro too once we get through the energetic flow and the numeric values. So here, the perspectives that I'm doing, perspectives 1 through 9, I am introducing those first. And this is how energy moves, how we can see energy moving, basically. I'm not trying to say how energy moves exactly, because I really don't think anybody can, except creator, consciousness outside construct, understands that with any kind of depth or truth. But much like we can see organic nature and define some mathematics to which is inspired by that, I think these shapes, these perspectives that we all know, very well, I think they I'm working to describe things that we see, an observation of the way that energy displays movement. It's very helpful to have a kind of outline, sort of like a blueprint to understanding how far away and from what angles and from what direction we are looking at movement. So with that said, with the little preamble here, sorry that my camera's kind of like on and off light, being crazy. It's kind of the outside light, and it's also a trashy Apple laptop that's very old and just only works when it wants to. So forgive me if it's distracting or anything like that. I apologize. So the 5th point of view is the lemniscate. Now, people might be more familiar or could understand it better with the figure 8, and that is what lemniscate is. The flow, the infinity flow, basically, is what is the lemniscate. It's a slightly different name and usage, because the lemniscate is a math word, and I really love the concept of it and the truth that it speaks, and the way that it grows out of the linear perspective, the single one line that I introduced as the first point of view. Because the lemniscate is one single strip, and it's been closed together, but with a twist beforehand. So it's not just the simple circle, but actually there was a twist in there when the circle's created. And having that twist ends up with the figure 8 flow. And like escalators use that lemniscate, like a rubber strip, to keep the escalator rolling and rolling without ever stopping. I don't know what else might use, I forget what else kind of uses that pulley system, but the escalator is a great reference if you're interested in looking at actual math behind it, or looking into that word, you know, why math uses it, and also why I've chosen to use it for that reason. You know, it's turning straight lines into curves is another kind of thing that I talk a lot about, which I won't get into right now because we don't have the time today. What we have the time for is the 5th point of view. So, just to sort of bring up my really bad notes here that I've been showing every time. We are here at this 5th point of view. I'm trying to show, and don't mind my chicken scratch, I will totally read this afterwards. But if you see how I've done this dotted line around it, now, sometimes people look at the figure 8, and it's 2 circles, and it really is 2 circles touching each other. Not almost like the Venn diagram where we have Vesica Pisces in the center. That's different understanding, even though it is that. But this is sort of birthed off of mitosis, the understanding here with the lemniscate, and with stage number 5. So when we see or we think of sort of the number 8 or Venn diagram, we think of initial 2 circles coming together, right? The secondary loop, as I call it, the second circle that is part of this figure 8, is not there yet in 5. 5 is the conceptual understanding that it is there. And much like with the product of conception, much like the cell that divides, you know, energy divides itself. And there's a mystery to it. There's creator consciousness at work here. So I am going to leave some things kind of unexplained, just like I have sort of through 3 and 4, brought in this idea of the center point, brought in the idea of the great zero and the lens of the observer, right? The creator's eye, actually a part of it. And whatever you want to bring into that magic mystery, it's unexpected. It's the dice roll, you know, it's pure potentiality, trying to be held, you know. So the dotted line in the secondary loop of that figure 8 is really helpful to keep as an image, to understand that in 5, in the stage 5, we have that sort of projection of the second half, of the real completion of the whole project. We have sort of the outline of how it can and will eventually come together. Now, the other thing I kind of wanted to bring up about the lemniscate and about the perspective, just to remember and recall to all of us that we're looking at the same thing. This is not each stage is not different and separate than the stage before it. They're all essentially looking at the same truth, just from different angles and proximity. And so you might say to yourself, well, how could a circle ever be a figure 8? You said there's 2 circles coming together and it's sort of a mitosis and a splitting. And it is, but think of the spiral staircase that I brought up for number 3, right? The stairs, each stair, if we think of a linear regular staircase, right? We can easily see only the stepping up happening when we're on the stairs, right? But if we're outside of the staircase, looking at the staircase in the room, we clearly see the spiral effect of it. Or if we're at the top floor, we're at the very bottom of the staircase and we look up, you can see the spiraling of it, right? Now, all the stages before 5 don't allow for external point of view. They are very involved in the creation, and it's sort of looking out of the first person view. That's how you experience the flow. That's how you experience the project, the energy, the situation. It's very much first person oriented. So even with the 4th stage and it coming around full circle for you, as you go up the spiral staircase, you start to realize, oh, I've seen this before. Oh, this is seasons. Oh, cycles. Oh, it's kind of all the same, even though it feels different. This is, just a metaphorical concept of understanding, but it's also a great truth, right? And once we understand that circling around the point, that's why stage 4 is the circle. It doesn't mean that it's only a circle shape. No, it's reflecting the great circling, the circle of that spiral staircase that you were going up, that you realize, oh, I'm going in a circle, right? The point of view 5 happens when we get to the top of the circle staircase and unexpectedness comes in. You get to that top floor or whatever, something, a shakeup happens. You fall off the staircase sometimes in 5. But it brings in the allowance or a catalyst or a circumstance of sorts that brings in a third-party view, to where it's not just about you looking out your eyes and the experience of climbing the stairs or doing the walk, but you see the walk for what it was. You're actually externalized from it. Either you've made it to the very top or you've fallen off of it, and you sort of see your whole project from outside. Now, the most helpful understanding, and when true organic understanding of point of view 5, why I've just delineated it as the lemniscate happens, right, is that you get to the top of the stairs. And when we get to the top of the staircase, what you see when you look down actually is the lemniscate. Think of the double helix, right? I know I've used single helix as the stairway, but we do have to remember that we are under polarity and duality. And so, yeah, we seemed like we're going up a single staircase, but there's 2 choices at all times in the staircase. And so it really is a double helix that's happening. Although you can only ride or walk or be a part of, it becomes a great balancing act between the polarities, depending on how you climb and what you're doing. But you can only serve one master at one time. You can only climb one side at one time. But they are both always there. And so when you get to the top, you see the polarity aspect, you see the double helix of it. And if you've ever been able to play around with perspective, or if you're an artist and you happen to just more innately get that, when you look down the top of a double helix, it looks like this. It looks like 2 straws, almost, going downwards. So we're not changing what we're looking at all. We're just changing the angle of how we see the whole project. And when we see this sort of thing like this, we can understand energies flowing back and forth through that. And again, same thing, helpful with the double helix and a helix in general, to understand the ladder working of it. The stairs are the ladder cross-section of the bars across the sides, right? And there's always communion and exchange happening between them. And so point of view 5 is that great recognition that there's external, a bigger picture, and also that there is a balancing act, give and take happening back and forth between everything that you've already been a part of. The other thing, like I mentioned sort of before, it becomes a view of what the secondary cycle can look like once you've reached the top of the staircase. If you've fallen off for whatever reasons and your staircase fell apart, or there's some troubleshooting, problem-solving issues that need to be backtracked through the prior stages because you have foundational issues. Because 5 should always be a strengthening catalyst. It should always be a catalyst that brings an epiphany or some kind of, clarity of understanding. Because 5 will lead us into 6, and we'll get to talk to this after, but 6, of course, represents perseverance, the making it through this upheaval, this sort of change. It can be something, sometimes we think of upheavals and we immediately have a negativity sort of connotation put on there, but it can totally be an uplifting, positive one, and it's right. So once we have this sort of shift come in, then we get the dotted line of what could be, what can be, this sort of secondary loop, the stages that come next, which is 6 through 9. Let me just see. I'm going just for a little taste of where we're going, and when we talk about numbers in numerical values, what the numbers are doing through the flow, right? Because right now we're kind of just talking about how the flow takes shape, and we're giving each one of those a stage with the numbers, but this is not exactly what numeric value is. We get into numeric value. I'll give this one as a brief little quick explanation here. See how I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 0 and 5 here in the center of this flipping, and then we have 6, 7, 8, 9 as the secondary loop. So this is what I'm speaking about. This with the 0, the portal or the lens of the observer and these unexpected things. 5 and 0 obviously are great pattern makers together in the first place, and they constitute change, refresh, change, refresh. And so it's the numbers map perfectly to where the strange flip happens. We have 0 already placed in that center because creator consciousness resides in this place. The 0 point, is what many scientists call that, but is what I like to call it, especially in the center of the toroidal, which we'll get into, of course, of 6, because the lemniscate is nothing but the toroidal, just simplified. But it's important to understand this simplified version first, of course, and to let go of trying to nail it down or try to say that it has to be the certain thing, because the essence of 0 and 5 together is that, who knows? It's exciting, it's adventure, it's catalytic, it's the experimental coming into play. No more theoretical, but it's the actual experiment portion of it to where real consequences come into play. And like I mentioned before, depending on what how you've grown through 1 through 4, you're either getting a check mark, like, yes, this dotted line appears, we can see where the secondary loop is, we can see where all this is going to really come to fruition very strongly and tie back together the 1 and the 9 in a holistic, productive fashion. Or, of course, that sort of fades away into nothingness and dissolves quite easily, and you're stuck with this the primary loop only, and you need to go back to foundation and find out where the cracks are, which of course is another thing with 5. 5 gets very much called the chaos number. It's very much like a tower event or devil card. Interesting enough, major arcana places the Hierophant at 5, and to this month's theme that I do for my readings every Friday, we have the Hierophant as our theme this month. So just to add in there as well, it can be, like I said, a great epiphany moment, a great connectivity to higher self, to higher knowledge, to bigger pictures, to where those great mysteries really become solidified and real for you. And that's really what I believe the real potential and the real energies locked within the 5 is. But of course it kind of gets scapegoated and put into this sort of fearsome, worrisome category, to where you want to try to control what might happen. And we have all of these projections and potential models of thinking to what could go wrong, and then we plan about if this goes wrong, all these different sort of sub plans. But that really is actually counterintuitive and counterproductive to the truth of what's trying to really happen with 5, and how we actually learn to let go of personal control mechanisms, relinquish that sort of micromanager, I know best of everything, I know even what external needs to bring in, and instead allow and say, actually what I know is how to respond to anything. I don't need to know what's coming up. I don't need to plan for every single sub-plan B through X, just in case. No, I know plan A is I am capable, smart, and consciously aware. And that in the present moment, what things happen, I am prepared for. And I will, in the moment, be called to the correct actions that need to be taken. And so leaning into trust and faith at that time is really crucial as well. Again, and I'm going to kind of close out with this, which is like not a lot of sciencey people, mathy people, people who are academia nuts, or like I like to call them penguin parrots, parroting back all of the penguin lines, a black and white says. If that's your sort of model, you're going to be very uncomfortable with trying to lean into faith, trying to bring God, creator, infinite intelligence, into your planning, into your projects, into your math, into your numbers, and I get that, and what I'm just trying to offer here is just to see it a little differently, just to allow yourself that freedom, to relinquish that controlling clause that so many scientist minds think that goes into experiments, goes into building something. It actually really is a co-creative effort with the third-party space that we're all a part of here. There really is an infinite intelligence resides in third-party space and in the ether. It's designed all of this stuff. And so when we operate from a place of respect and self-accountability, and also responsibility to this third-party audienceship that we're all a part of, all things work better. All troubleshooting works better. All problems become smaller, become doable. So just to try to, even if it's just imagination exercises, you can think back to all the greats, if whoever you'd like to call your greats, Newton, Einstein, whoever you put on a pedestal out there, they did thought experiments. And in fact, they probably actually believed in a creator. So even, the great Einstein, so many people love to revert to him in my generation and stuff. It's like, he even said the more he learned about math, the more he believed in God. So, I just want to leave that there as an offering, and also, if you don't have to go and be some kind of traditionalist, religionist, have some kind of born again badge put on you or anything like that. I'm not trying to say I have any of that. I don't. And in fact, I think all of those are delineations away from organic one truth. But I do seek an organic one truth, and I do know it's there. And so I hope to just inspire people to just loosen up a little bit, just get into imagination space. All of those great thinkers, they did thought experiments. They were using their imagination and their thought world to perform experiments theoretically within. And so that has validity. That has a prep planning portion of time. And just to get yourself better and comfortable with that even is enough. You know, you don't have to go and tie it into anybody else's version of what could be God. Just because you use that word doesn't mean you have to align with whichever traditions use that three-letter word. You know, just like if you said Allah or Krishna or spaghetti monster in the sky. You know, like my dad likes to call him the great Santa Claus in the sky. That's what my dad, you know, thinks to call God. It doesn't, that so much doesn't matter as just to relinquish the control mechanisms of trying to say predeterminedly what you know about already out there. Because that's actually anti-scientific. You know, go back to the fundamentals, things we teach elementary schools about the scientific method. Observation is number one. You can't go into observation with assumptions and preconceptions about what you're seeing. That's anti-science right in itself. And so just to encourage people to listen with an open ear and to perhaps get comfortable with things that they're uncomfortable with. It really does help, you know. So so this is my little jive on point of view number 5 on the lemniscate, and on the potential buildings of the secondary loop and the sort of outline of what this really reflects. And the last thing that I will say is that the imaginary loop, just like I've said about polarity and the single spiral staircase actually being a double helix because we have duality happening, this is why the outline, the dotted line, is even more relevant, and it can help us to understand why it's a dotted line, why it's invisible, is just like positive and negative choice points of kind of the spiraling staircase have their own architecture. They're sort of invisible to each other because you can only be on one at a single time. And so while they are both are there, one is only real to you, right? Just like this first loop is very real, it's already outlined. Like I've shown sort of on my really trashy notes here, you know, not this one, but this one. You know, this is the assumption. This is, you know, the fullness of it. It really is happening. It really is a whole lemniscate, and it really is always tossing energy back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But the validity and the strength of the energies provided, we have this primary loop only that is solidified and can be done with working in it. You know, so that's especially why if you've sort of fallen off the stairs with the catalytic events that 5 brings in, it's never, oh, well, it couldn't make it to 6. You know, it's not something's wrong in the stage that it just can't make it to 6. No, it's that in this primary foundation, you have some problems. Now, whether or not this is that you have, you know, cracks in foundation in 4, and it's something easy that you can go and sort of rebuild a wall or put in some support beams, you know, if you want to look at this as architecture in a home. It could be something that's an easy fix that perhaps that you sort of Mickey Moused, you know, you kind of quickly put together in stage 4 at some point. However, it could be cracks in the literal foundation, or it could be, you know, compromised ground that you've completely built on, and it's sinking into swampland, you know, so to speak, and that you've built on the incorrect ground completely, and it's all the way in stage 1 that's not working at. And a lot of times what happens, I'll just leave this at the end here, is that we've tricked our consciousness into falsely building stages. This is a lot of times things fall apart for 5 because they're not real. We never got out of full number 1. And in fact, you're not even at level 5. You're at 1.5. So you're at 1.5. And you have never gotten to 2. And this can be a really eye-opening, world-shaking things that again, people will trick themselves, and people will say, oh, no, I can't possibly just have been, that can't have all been in my head. That can't have all been built off of false constructs in my own self-serving manner. And they lock into their loops even deeper and into their lies even deeper. And then they continue to try to build up their project. But, you know, it can be a very eye-opening event to where you just take it back to 1 and realize, I put a ton of control mechanisms on this. I never allowed it to actually grow out of stage 1 with my own singular linear point of view, with my own beginning and ending that I am in full control of every step along the way. Because the only way that number 1 gets to be in full control of everything involved in the project, the entire steps of the way, is if it never gets out of number 1. And you can build infinitely in 1 point, throw as many zeros in there as you want. You'll never take your project to actual number 2, which involves external others, opposition. It asks you to actually intermingle with things that make you uncomfortable. It actually asks you to allow another to touch your project in a very physical manner, you know, be involved in it. Some people are too scared to do that. And so they'd rather plan inside their own selves, and they think that they can think about all of number 2. And then they think that through thinking about what they think number 2 could be like, then they try to imprison number 3 and say that, oh, well, number 3 would have to grow this way because I've allowed 1 and 2 to be like this. And in fact, you get to 5 and the wind blows and you want to take something and outside actually does come in, your whole house of cards is going to fall because you are never actually building a real home. You're building Lincoln logs. You're building a house of cards all by yourself, you know, and unfortunately somebody opened the window and blew the whole thing over, you know, or your dog came over and knocked the whole thing in, or you have a little brother or sister and they kicked it over, you know. You can pray imagination inside that Lincoln log that you're the king of the castle and build a whole city around it if you care to, with your imagination down in there, and pretend you live down in there. But you're never actually exposing it to any other because you're scared they're going to break it, because you're scared they're going to touch it, because it's not going to be built the way that you want it to be built. And you know, as creator consciousness and free will, we have the choices to do these things. But you can't pretend that they involve external reality and that they're actually going to hold validity out here in the real world when you're building them within a laboratory construct in a sterile environment that nobody's allowed to even breathe in the direction of your thing. It's, you know, locked in. We have zoomed in number 1 only and started dissecting in there, you know, started making more space down in there, thinking that we have all the free space out here, you know. Versus if you had allowed the whole time that brother, or the window's been open the whole time and you've sort of been building and you've made it through these kind of other things. When you come to 5, you might find out that, oh yeah, well, the wind only blew over like a couple pieces of my Lincoln log cabin, you know, and that's fine because we'll rebuild those back up. And then wow, you have your whole little Lincoln log town that like your little brother or whoever has, and maybe your dog walks through a couple of them, but it's not a big deal. You just put them back together, you know. That's what perseverance through 5 is about. That's how the learning and, you know, the tangible learning experiences, the XP points come in for 5. And then it continues on into 6, you know, with this flow, with the continuity that makes sense, right? And that in itself is strengthening, you know? So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for listening to this part 6 on my perspective 5. I hope you'll catch next time where I'll talk about the 6th perspective. Yeah, have a wonderful day or evening wherever in the world you are. Thanks for your contribution to the collective. We certainly wouldn't be the same without you. Thank you for witnessing mine, and I'll see you next time.